Hello, in this video I'm going to be talking about how to open and read files. This will be a short example because it really uses the same principles and concepts as in the examples for writing to files. It's very similar, the syntax is very similar. We use the file stream object again. Using the same syntax, we declare a file stream object and then create it using the new keyword. And then again, it has three inputs in the parentheses, the file name. This time, instead of the file name where you want to save to, it's the file name where you're opening from. And now the file mode is open and the file access is read. Now we create a stream reader instead of a stream writer, but it's the same syntax. We use the file stream object name inside the parentheses. And then instead of using the write line method, we'll use the read line method. And starting from the top, the read line method reads the next line. So if there are 3 lines of data in your file, then you'd want to have 3 lines of code saying stream reader name dot read line. Now, you often don't know, the application doesn't know exactly how many lines of text or lines of data are in a file. And so what you can do is use a while loop to check so that the code only runs while there are still lines to read. There's a really neat method called the peek method that is built into a stream reader. And when there are still lines left in the file to read, the peek method returns a value of 1. And when there are no more lines to read, the peek method returns a value of 0. So we can use a loop statement saying, while the stream reader peek method is greater than 0, then keep repeating the code to read the next line of the file. I'll show you an example of this in just a second. And here I've included in this last slide of the PowerPoint file, just a reference for using those file dialog boxes. I showed an example of this in the previous video where we were saving to a file. We used the save file dialog, and now that we're opening up files, we can use the open file dialog. That works similarly. You just use the show dialog method to pop it up, and then the dot file name property is the path that you can save as a string. So let me jump over to Visual Studio and create a new project. This one I'm just going to call Read Student Scores. And I'm going to save it in my desktop code folder. And what I want this application to be able to do is open up and save to an array the list of student scores that were saved in a file. So here I will add a button to my form, and I will call that I'll have it say open, and I'll call it the open button. And then I'm also going to add a label. So whatever is in the file, I'm going to have it be displayed in this label. So I will call it the result label. And start it with blank text. Now, if I double click on the open button, I can start adding my code. And again, I'm going to be using similar syntax as with writing to a file. So I'll start by creating my file stream object, and I'll just name it FS. And we'll type new file stream. And the file stream always takes 3 inputs. The first being the path. So I'm just going to I'm going to replace this in a little bit, but I'm just going to put that as a placeholder for now. The second element is the file mode, which is going to be open. And the third is the file access, which is going to be read. Now it's giving me this error because I almost forgot at the top to put using system.io. It stands for input output. Okay, and then my next line is my stream reader. I'll call it SR. New stream reader. And the input there is our file stream, in this case FS. Then we'll do some stuff, and then at the end we will close the file stream and stream reader, but in the opposite order. Oops. Our stream reader .close method and our file stream .close method. Now, if we want the user to be able to choose this path, then what we can do is we can go to all Windows forms and find the open file dialog, drag it onto our form. By default, it's called the open file dialog 1. So actually here at the top, we can show dialog and save the file path. So the open file dialog 1, and we use the show dialog method to open it. And then we'll save that path to a string called path. And that will just be the name of the control open file dialog 1 dot file name. So now here, I'm going to replace this literal string with the name of that string variable path. Now I'm actually adding an extra step here. I could, instead of saving this path string variable, I could just have this open file dialog 1 dot file name here as my first parameter of my file stream. I like to keep things separate just to keep things more organized and clear. Okay, so what we want to actually happen is read every line of the file and add it to a string array. So if I was just reading the first line of the file, then I would say sr.readLine. And, I could maybe save that to some string variable. And that would just read the first line of the file. And then if I wanted to read the second line of the file, I could have, some string, and then I could append onto it the next line of the file. Because I may not know how many lines are in the file, and I want to just read every line in the file, I'm going to use a loop. In this case, I'm going to use a while loop, and I'm going to use the syntax that I showed you in the slides. Which is using the stream reader. The stream reader has a built-in method called peek, and that returns a value It's 1 if there's still more lines to read, and it's 0 if there's not more lines to read. So while, oh, excuse me, it's 0 or 1 if there are more lines to read. It's -1 if there are no more lines to read. So I want to iterate this loop while the peek method is still returning 0 or higher, meaning that there's still more lines to read. So while there are still more lines to read in the file, I'm going to add to my result label. I'm going to append, I'm going to concatenate onto my result label the next line read by the stream reader. So all this does is this just continuously repeats while there's more lines to read in the file. It reads the next line and adds it to the label. Okay, so whoops, I had said one thing in my comment and I did another. Okay, so we could add it to a string array, but instead we're just adding it to a label on the form. So I will test this out. If I click open, then it lets me choose a file. So I'll go to where we saved the student's file. And it puts it on that line. And I just want to make one correction, because this is adding everything to the same line of the label. Even though we're reading new lines of the text every time, it's adding it to the same line of the label. So we each time want to also add a new line character. And that's it.